Hey, how are you doing? In 2014, a man 43 years old coming from Cameroon was dead in the immigration detention center in Ibaraki Prefecture of Japan because of negligence of the Immigration Bureau of Japan. So there was a judgment of the suit that his mother claimed compensation for the damage against the director of an immigration detention center in Ibaraki at 10 million yen on 16th September this year at the Mito District Court. And the presiding judge admitted the responsibility of the Japanese government in order to pay the damage, compensatory damage for 1,650,000 yen. And the judgment content said that staff in the immigration detention center purposely neglected care duty for emergency call, although they already understood the necessity of emergency call at the previous night before he had been dead in the detention center at the latest. So, according to a petition, a man from Cameroon arrived at the Narita International Airport in October 2013, but he was rejected to enter into Japan at the airport. So, and he was detained and transported to an immigration detention center located in Ibaraki Prefecture of Japan. So he originally had diabetes, so that he got a doctor's checkup and he got prescription in the detention center, but he frequently complained his bad health, like I can't stand up. And at the end of March in 2014, and his death was confirmed in the morning on 30th March in 2014. So apparently he came to Japan with only the barest necessities and one-way tickets from Cameroon to Japan. So considering his circumstance, the cause that he was rejected to enter into Japan at the immigration gate can be thought of several cases. Like the first case is like he got caught his intention of illegal staying in Japan in some way by immigration officer. And the second case is like his fake passport or fake visa was found out by immigration officer. And third case is like he initially intended to apply for asylum to Japan. So how he tried to enter in Japan was not normal, no matter how we look at it. So it is obvious that he tries to enter into Japan not in the proper way. So normally the Immigration Bureau of Japan will take the measure of deportation in terms of a person who is rejected to enter into Japan regardless of the person's intention. If a person doesn't have enough money to prepare for a return ticket back to his own country, the Japanese government will pay for it. But the fact that he was detained and transported to the immigration detention center in Ibaraki Prefecture means that there may be a possibility that he offered the application for asylum. So he may have expected this situation from the beginning. And there may be high possibility that he ended up being in custody in the immigration detention center until he was recognized as refugee in Japan. So there's one thing I want to tell those who think about asylum to Japan, and there's one thing I want to tell those who want to come to Japan as a refugee. Please don't do that. All right, please stop doing that. Please don't do that. So Japan is not really kind to a person who come to Japan for asylum, right? In worst case, you will die. This is not threat. Japan's low awareness of human rights is certified as genuine. So the Japanese government always sensitively keep a great lookout for a person with a valid visa with the primary purpose for asylum to Japan, right? Japan is one of the most conservative countries in the world, and fundamentally we have thought that we don't want anyone to invade our identity, and we want to maintain social structure supported by homogeneous race, right? So if our identity is invaded by someone coming from outside, we feel the risk that we can't stop collapsing social order and public security in Japan. So we are always scared of this thing, right? So we are extremely exclusive to people coming from outside with the purpose to settle in Japan. So basically, the Japanese government doesn't really want to grant person with unknown background permission to stay in Japan, no matter how terrible situation he or she escaped from. So staff of the Immigration Bureau of Japan treat foreigners who apply for asylum to Japan as just like a criminal. Like they always doubt if foreigners in the detention center may plan an evil scheme. So they are no different from police that doubts injustice. So the immigration detention center is no different from jail for prisoners, where they make prisoners admit wrongdoing. So they no longer have sympathy with the circumstance of people in the detention center. They think if there is something wrong with a person in a detention center, they immediately prepare for the procedure of deportation. So this is the reality for a person who applies for asylum in Japan. In 2021, the number of people who applied for asylum to Japan was 2,413. And the number of people who were recognized as a refugee was only 74, right? The percentage of the number of refugees toward the total applicants was only 3%. Only 3%. This is the lowest percentage of refugee acceptance in the advanced countries. So in Germany, the percentage of the number of refugees toward the total applicants in 2020 was 78%. So you understand how stupid percentage it is, and you understand how difficult it is for you to apply for asylum to Japan. So if you want to abandon your country because of emergency situation, you should choose another country except for Japan. Japan is not an appropriate country that accepts asylum. So Japan is a piece of shit in terms of humanity assistance, right? So one of the big reasons that Japan refrained from accepting refugees is that the proof requirements that are realistically impossible to be fulfilled are demanded to people who apply for asylum to Japan. For example, the Immigration Bureau required refugees to submit passport or something that is capable of proving who they are and where they're from, right? But there may be possibility that refugees is really an emergency situation and refugees discard a passport or a document that proves his or her identification by fears of deportation by the authority of their countries. So this is the reasonable behavior. But if people escape to another country with only the barest necessities, so there is a possibility that they don't even have a passport to enter into the country. So nevertheless, the Immigration Bureau of Japan stubbornly stick to objective proof to accept refugees in Japan. So in the first place, at the time a person can prepare every single document that proves his identification, he is not seen as a refugee generally. I think so. So the Japanese government don't want to accept refugees as much as possible. So the reason why the Japan had the law of refugee is to only save the face as an advanced countries, as an advanced country, right? So the Japanese government actually opened the gate for refugees, ostensibly, but it has no mind to accept refugees. And refugees' treatment in the immigration detention center is as inhumane as the United Nations gave a recommendation to Japan. So the Immigration Bureau, Immigration Bureau caused some fatality accident in the past, not only this time. So even if a person in the detention center complains of bad health seriously to staff, the staff doubts that the person may plan an evil scheme and try to pretend to suffer from serious illness to get special treatment from the Immigration Bureau. So they have no mind to take care of people who seriously suffer from illness with no mercy. They are not human anyway. So the Japanese people basically come into line with stance of Japanese government against the refugees, right? So the Japanese people thought like the death of the refugees in the immigration detention center was well-deserved punishment. So they don't even think the circumstance. They don't even think the circumstance of refugees, and they don't even think how to support refugees in the country. So only the things the Japanese people are really interested in is the concerns about the amount of tax used to the individual refugees in the immigration detention center for their livings. So they think this way of using tax is injustice. They don't want the Japanese government to use tax for refugees in Japan. And the pursuit rightness of how refugees entered into Japan from police perspective. So most Japanese really want to deport refugees back to their own country, and blaming the government for not deporting refugees back to their countries. So this is the truth. So refugees in Japan are pretty much like surrounded by enemies. So do not think that you want to come to Japan for asylum. You're treated as a criminal, and in the worst case, you're gonna be dead in Japan. So Japan is really stupidly the most inhumane country in the world. So you can understand how inhumane Japan is from the amount of damage compensation for the damage paid to a man from Cameroon who was dead in the immigration detention center. So only 1,650,000 yen. When I just converted into US dollar, only 120,000 US dollars for compensation for his damage, for his death. It's a really stupidly low price. So Japan is fucking hell for refugees.